Strict construction. When interpretation reshapes society. Introduction. Most people assume that laws, rights, and social structures are permanent once established. History demonstrates otherwise. In both law and theology, the method used to interpret authoritative texts often determines the outcome as much as the text itself. One interpretive approach that has become increasingly influential within American jurisprudence is strict construction. Strict construction is not merely a legal theory. It is a method of interpretation that can alter precedent, redefine rights, and reshape society's understanding of what government may or may not do. The consequences extend far beyond courtrooms because legal precedent forms the framework through which citizens understand how society functions. At the same time, strict construction exists alongside other judicial philosophies, such as living constitutionalism and pragmatic approaches, which argue that legal interpretation should account for changing social conditions and contemporary realities. What is strict construction? Strict construction is a judicial philosophy that seeks to interpret legal texts according to their specific wording rather than expanding their meaning through broader implications or evolving social expectations. Under this approach, courts often ask, what did the text actually say? What did the authors intend? What authority does the text explicitly grant? What authority does the text explicitly deny? Strict construction resists reading additional meanings into legal language that are not clearly present in the text itself. As a result, long-standing precedents may be reconsidered if judges conclude that those precedents were built upon interpretations that extended beyond the original text. Supporters argue that this approach promotes judicial restraint and democratic accountability by limiting judges to the text. Critics, however, contend that an overly rigid focus on original wording may fail to address modern circumstances that the authors of a legal text could not have anticipated. The domino effect of overturned precedent. In legal systems built upon precedent, one major decision often serves as the foundation for numerous subsequent rulings. When a foundational precedent is overturned or substantially limited, related decisions may become vulnerable. The legal principle is straightforward. If decision B, C, and D depend upon decision A, then weakening or overturning decision A raises questions about the validity of B, C, and D. Consequently, courts may revisit entire categories of law. This process does not merely change legal doctrine. It changes how citizens understand their rights, responsibilities, and expectations regarding government power. People often discover that what they assumed was permanently settled may have been dependent upon a specific interpretation that is now being challenged. Others argue that revisiting precedent can be necessary when earlier decisions are viewed as inconsistent with constitutional text, while defenders of precedent emphasize the importance of stability, predictability, and reliance interests within the legal system. Examples of strict construction's influence Roe versus Wade. One of the most significant examples is the overturning of the Supreme Court decision in the landmark case known as Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which overturned the precedent established by Roe versus Wade. The court concluded that the Constitution did not explicitly provide the right previously recognized under Roe. The result was a dramatic shift in authority from the federal judiciary back to individual states. Supporters of the Dobbs decision viewed it as a return to constitutional text and democratic processes, while critics argued that it removed a previously recognized constitutional protection and disrupted established expectations. Affirmative action, strict construction also influenced decisions limiting race-conscious admissions policies. Courts increasingly questioned whether such programs aligned with the specific language and equal protection principles found within constitutional and statutory texts. Advocates of these rulings often emphasize equal treatment under the law, whereas opponents argue that race-conscious measures may be necessary to address historical inequities and promote educational diversity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Many DEI initiatives have faced heightened scrutiny as legal challenges ask whether certain practices exceed what anti-discrimination laws explicitly authorize. Rather than evaluating desired outcomes, strict construction asks whether the governing text clearly permits the action. By contrast, some legal scholars and policymakers argue that broader interpretations of anti-discrimination laws may better advance their underlying purposes. Disparate impact theory. Disparate impact analysis evaluates policies that produce unequal outcomes even when discriminatory intent is absent. Strict constructionists often focus on whether statutory language explicitly authorizes such interpretations, leading to ongoing debate about the future scope of disparate impact enforcement. Supporters of disparate impact theory contend that focusing solely on intent may overlook systemic barriers that produce unequal results. Birthright citizenship. The continuing debate surrounding birthright citizenship reflects similar interpretive tensions. Questions center on how the citizenship language of the 14th Amendment should be understood, whether through historical context, original public meaning, or evolving application. Different interpretive schools reach different conclusions, illustrating how judicial philosophy can influence constitutional analysis. Future areas of legal debate. Many legal scholars anticipate that strict construction arguments may increasingly affect privacy-related rights. Potential areas of discussion include same-sex marriage, reproductive autonomy, digital privacy, data ownership, government surveillance, technology regulation. Whether existing precedents remain secure may depend upon how future courts interpret constitutional text, historical understanding, and precedent itself. Some jurists may favor a more originalist or strict construction approach, while others may emphasize evolving societal needs, practical consequences, or broader constitutional principles. Beyond theology, shared investigative tools. An important observation is that interpretive tools are not unique to theology. Methods commonly used in biblical studies frequently appear in legal analysis. Apologetics. Apologetics is often defined as the reasoned defense of a position. In law, attorneys engage in a comparable activity when defending constitutional interpretations, legal doctrines, or judicial precedents. Hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is the science and art of interpretation. Lawyers, judges, theologians, historians, and scholars all employ hermeneutical principles when determining meaning from authoritative texts. Exegesis. Exegesis seeks to draw meaning out of a text based upon its context. Strict construction often resembles a form of legal exegesis by emphasizing what the text actually says rather than what interpreters wish it said. Other interpretive approaches may place greater emphasis on broader constitutional purposes, evolving norms, or practical effects. Eisegesis occurs when interpreters read external assumptions into a text. Critics of expansive judicial theories frequently argue that courts engage in legal eisegesis when they discover rights or powers not clearly grounded in constitutional language. Conversely, defenders of broader interpretive methods may argue that constitutional principles sometimes require application beyond the narrowest reading of specific words. Contextual analysis. Both law and theology require careful examination of historical context, authorial intent, audience language usage, cultural environment. Without context, interpretation becomes vulnerable to distortion. Different schools of interpretation may assign varying levels of importance to these factors, but most agree that context plays a significant role in understanding authoritative texts, case law, and case studies. Theologians analyze biblical narratives and doctrinal developments. Lawyers analyze judicial precedents and legal doctrines. Both disciplines rely heavily upon comparative reasoning, precedent evaluation, and evidence-based argumentation. Conclusion: strict construction is more than a judicial preference. It is an interpretive methodology capable of reshaping entire legal systems. When courts revisit foundational precedents, the effects extend beyond legal doctrine into culture, politics, and everyday life. At the same time, it represents only one of several influential approaches to legal interpretation. Competing philosophies offer different views regarding the balance between textual fidelity, historical understanding, precedent, and adaptation to contemporary circumstances. The broader lesson is that interpretation matters. Whether one is examining a constitution, a statute, a historical document, or scripture, the tools used to determine meaning often determine the conclusions reached. Apologetics, hermeneutics, exegesis, contextual analysis, and investigative reasoning are not confined to theology. They are universal disciplines of inquiry used wherever people seek to understand authoritative texts and apply them faithfully. The ongoing legal debate surrounding privacy, citizenship, equality, and constitutional rights demonstrate a timeless reality. Societies are shaped not only by the texts they possess, but also by the methods they use to interpret them.